equity is great. You should always be aiming for high margins. You should never see your equity as cash reserves. The reason is that's like a secondary. I would actually say cash reserves 1, lines of credit 2, equity 3. But you don't need the second one, although they're nice. But you need cash reserves and equity.
Welcome to the Good Stewards Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to seasoned real estate investors who want to maximize the cash flow potential in their business. We are buy and hold investors with 1,000+ properties and markets across the U.S. who bring an insider's view into the nitty-gritty details of real estate investing. If you're looking to develop the mindset, teams, and systems that can dramatically build your real estate business and net worth, you're in the right place.
Welcome to this episode of the Good Stewards Podcast. I'm Ryan Dossie.
I'm Amanda Perkins.
I'm Bill Sirius.
And I'm Andrew Sirius. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. We are going through the questions that are on the top of people's minds. We've gotten some questions this week, and we wanted to give the best answers that we possibly could. We know there's a lot going on. There's the COVID-19 pandemic. There's the lockdown. There's people yelling at each other. Social media is particularly fire. I've seen a notable uptrend in posts that have all caps. So I know people are a little cooped up, and we'll try to get you your real estate answers as best we can here. So we've gotten some questions on Facebook, on our forums, and our articles and whatnot. And so one of the first one we've seen, several we've gotten, were about lending requirements. One specifically, I think the lender dropped what they were willing to lend 12%, which cost $400,000 on the loan amount. And I've heard of this throughout here and there and whatnot, is people really getting hit hard on lenders basically saying, oh yeah, we'll do this before COVID, and then pre-COVID, post-COVID, you have PC and I guess they're both PC, but whatever.
AC,
pre-COVID,
after
COVID. I was thinking post-COVID, after COVID, during COVID, DC. Is lenders really hitting us? In fact, we got hit on one. We actually had one experience with our Texas partnership where we had a loan that we had gotten a kind of a pre-approval letter or at least a term sheet, and then once COVID happened, they really hammered us. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head exactly how much they went up on went down on the LTV and up on the interest rate. But
our strategy was we were kind of excited because this lender offered 30-year amortization, which we were on a 20-year, and we were basically trying to lower our monthly expenditures. This was pre-COVID. And they also had about a point interest rate drop from where we were at. So we were in the process of refinancing over 40 properties.
Yeah, about 46, I think.
Yeah, and had quite a bit of money out in those appraisals. And all of a sudden, the lender said, no, sorry, here's our new term sheet, which was dramatically worse, a higher interest rate, and lower LTV, and poof, that was gone. Now, we will go back to them and knock on their door again in a month or two just to see if maybe things are different. This lender is not tied to a bank. It was the funds were coming from other sources like hedge funds and so forth. So the interest rate drop did not help us there when their lending requirements stiffened up dramatically. So it's happening all over the place.
It is a lender that we've closed properties with before, but it did feel a lot like having the rug pulled out from under you because we had sent in a significant chunk of money that we'll hope their terms can get back in line. I just don't know if they'll get back in line and still honor the appraisals we paid for on 46 properties. So
The way to approach this issue, though, is just to understand that it's going to happen. Now, we've had we've had this happen to us once in Texas. We've heard multiple people dealing with this issue. There's two things I would note. The first one is we have not had this problem in Kansas City, nor Eugene, I believe, with the banks that we have very good relationships with, the ones we have built relationships over with several years. So it's important to build and then nourish your banking relationships. You always want to keep adding new relationships as you can, because sometimes a bank will fall out. And that's happened to us too. They're like, we're just not into single family investment properties anymore. No offense or anything like that.
I want to add one little thing in with that relationship. The relationship is more than just you borrowing money from them. We oftentimes, always times, have to put money, significant amount of money, and leave it in a bank, because that's what counts as a relationship. So when we're talking about building a relationship, it's not just going back and continuing to get loans. It's also making a commitment to put your funds with the bank. And unfortunately, it means we have funds spread out through many different banks, but our banking relationships really get us through in times like this. But it's taken years to build that sort of a network. Anyway, I just wanted to add that little.
And also those relationships extend to private lenders and folks who've done seller financing. Yesterday, Andrew and I talked to a fellow who actually did seller financing on 97 properties that we bought from him. We have a partner in that, and we're negotiating with our partner to see if we can become sole owners of those properties. And it was just heartening to hear him say, "You're the best people I've ever dealt with in terms of a lending relationship." And we've been doing that now for over 4 years with him. So your reputation, your follow through, your honoring your word, your credit, it's all really important. And if you're going to build over time and scale your business, you've got to put that front and center as a high priority.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, your reputation is key for those relationships. But in addition, the main thing, some banks are really tightening up. Some banks are still lending. A lot of it depends on what is their cash at? How many delinquencies do they have? What do they believe is going to happen down the line? Every bank is different in the same way every investor, every agent, every property, every seller is different. And so if you have one, I mean, if you get caught in the middle of one and the bank just drops it on you, like we're going to lower the LTV a bunch, that's terrible. Nothing you can do there. But don't give up. There are other banks that, don't just take the bad deal or give up. It might be worth waiting. But the big thing is just, pound the pavement. Go to your local RIA. Get on the bigger pockets forms. Get on Good Stewards. Get on, just start asking around who's still lending, which banks are lending at full, 75% LTV, same terms and the like, and start approaching them. But so long term, build up your relationships. Those will keep you through. Short term, just talk to other investors. Everyone is dealing with this. This is a worldwide thing. Everyone's dealing with it, so everyone knows what you're talking about. And there are banks that are still doing it. So it's the key is to look for those banks, and hopefully you have those relationships. And if you don't, start building them. But if you can start now. It's not impossible to, and the rates are very good. Let's go on to our next question. One person asked about they needed to inspect a very large apartment complex, 220 units, and we recommend always going through every single unit. Don't rely on the word of the seller. Buyers are liars, and sellers are, well, they're liars too. And so if you're only going to see 30%, 40%, they're going to be the better ones, and they're going to make sure to show you the better ones. So get into every single unit. And I guess the problem was basically that COVID happened, and now it's very difficult to get into those units. And so what is the way to deal with this? Well, the first thing I would note is you should always have a clause in your contract that allows you to extend it. So we always put into our apartment or portfolio contracts what we call 30-30-30. Basically 30 days to do the inspection period where our earnest money is refundable, 30 more days to close it. And then if we need more time for whatever reason, loan, blah, 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 we can put down another earnest money and extend it 30 days more to make it 90 days. That being said, I think this entire situation deserves possibly another clause that we should consider adding, and we all should consider adding, is something like, a disaster or something like that makes it impossible to perform due diligence will automatically extend the contract until that disaster has been resolved, or that pandemic. That would be something to consider. I don't think that would be a problem, but generally speaking, so I do think you should consider putting that in. We are definitely going to talk to an attorney about that. But I think in this instance, if you're under contract with somebody, they presumably want to sell it to you. They presumably don't want to put it back on the market. And I'm sorry, you're not going to find investors who are, these institutional investors who are buying 200 unit apartments who aren't going to do very thorough due diligence. And so, yeah, they might not go through every single unit. Not everyone's going to do that, but they're going to go through a lot. So there's no investors out there, oh, yeah, we'll buy a sight unseen, or they'll do it. But like, yeah, okay, we're going to pay you 20 cents on the dollar or something just absurd. So in all likelihood, the seller will work with you. They understand the situation. Everybody is dealing with this problem. So I don't just get in touch with the seller and ask to extend the due diligence. Or is there a way that, or maybe just seeing like if there's some residents that, you get everything done that you can now. In most states, it appears that the quarantine will be lifted sometime in early May or mid-May. I mean, I think some places are already starting to reopen. And then, you should be able to get a mask or two, and you make sure that everyone go through has a mask, maybe have rubber gloves, don't touch anything, make sure that the residents know that they don't need to be there, that they're going to be in and out quickly, that you're going to be wearing a mask and stuff like that to help put them at ease. But the resident's still obligated to allow the management company to have access. So it's not impossible to do it even when people are nervous about it.
Well, and I would add something into it. Something that is just going to be a fact of life. Maybe something I was considering purchasing for X dollars pre-COVID. Maybe I'm not as willing to close it during COVID or after COVID because without being extra diligent and looking at, all right, how many people that were living there that were paying rent no longer have jobs and are struggling to make rent payments, and looking at when the rents are coming in compared to how they were coming in. Maybe maybe it's a good enough property that it wasn't in an area that wasn't hit that hard, but maybe it's really bad. And maybe it's just, I would be taking a closer look at something and looking at it again, every month as it goes through, just to make sure it's really something that you want to close post-COVID.
A couple of examples in Eugene recently, one in which we got a $10,000 reduction because of COVID, essentially, and the uncertainty in the market. And another one, we went back to the seller and they owned it free and clear. It's a $350,000 property that we are going to flip in this case. And because they owned it free and clear, we proposed to them that they do seller carry for 6 months. And it's actually a lease option. So we turned a contract that we would normally get a private lender on into something that the seller carried it back. And what was so sweet about that is that they're doing it for $500 a month, which covers their taxes and insurance, instead of what would have cost us to get a private lender on that. Plus, we'd be paying taxes and insurance. And so overall, for 4 months, we have it for $500 a month. That's a pretty sweet deal. And the situation allowed us that creativity, and it made sense to the seller because of this uncertainty in the market. So there are things.
Yeah, people are afraid of people backing out. We were selling a flip house and just unfortunately got hit right at the time. We had 2 sellers back out. We got under contract against closing here in a second. I don't want to jinx myself, but it's about to close, hopefully. But we're not at the same price, and we had to do more repairs. So it's one of those things people are thinking about this, and it might be worth backing out. It might be worth retrading. It might be worth backing out. Those are things to consider. I mean, you don't want to go into a deal planning on retrading. That's not the right way to do business. And you don't want to back out if you don't have to. But
retrading
you got to retrade.
Basically, what is retrading, Andrew? Some people might not know.
Retrading is just renegotiating the price once it's after it's under contract. It's just the real estate jingo for it. So you don't want to go and planning to retrade. You don't want to back out if you don't have to, but sometimes you do. I mean, that's part of the business, and you shouldn't be afraid to do it when it's necessary. I think we should probably move on along to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, how long is too long to hold on to a property that's not cash flowing? I think that depends on so many things. Are we talking about $10,000 a month of negative cash flow? Or are you talking about a couple hundred? Are you talking about 100? I mean, I think first of all, how much money you're going backwards every month is a big deal. If it's a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was brought a deal yesterday by one of our partners that basically was going to lose about $1,500 a month. And he was thinking we would wait 3 years until we could see this turn around. I said, I'm absolutely not interested in that. even though this had some creativity to it, because you could cut off the back lot and build on the back of the property, cut it in half. I said, well, I'd much rather just sell the front property right now so we can kind of see where we're at, and then get to work on constructing a house on the backside of the lot, which you can do in this particular city. So, I think negative cash flow is kind of a losing proposition in general, because there's no guarantee of appreciation, particularly in this market. There's probably a guarantee of depreciation, if anything. So in this market, negative cash flow is even more negative than generally assumed. So the only positive about waiting is that you're paying down your loan if you have a lender loan from a bank, and so you're paying down the principal. Weighing that out, how's your cash reserves? Do you really are you able to really handle that?
I think there are a couple things to note. One is it's a couple other things to note. Generally, you're right. You don't want to hold it, especially if it's a large loss. The only exception, if you know it's a loss that you would want to hold, in my opinion, is if you are highly confident that this area is probably going to appreciate. You can never know for certain, but if you're buying exactly in the path of progress and it's about to get hit by it, let's say you're right next to downtown and they're expanding it, there's a streetcar going by it, something along those lines. Or I would say these are very rare instances, and generally it should be a very small part of your portfolio you're willing to do this with, and you should probably be a seasoned and experienced investor to do this.
Or forced depreciation, which is basically value add by doing something to the property that really increases its value, that would increase its value to sell, or possibly its value to cash flow.
That would be to increase the value to sell, or which is kind of leading in the next point. Can you fix it? It's not necessarily easy to tell whether you're cash flowing, especially if it's a house. One bad turnover, one resident who doesn't pay rent for a few months, that year is lost. You are going to lose money on the house that year, but that doesn't mean the house is, just destined to lose money forever. So it's sort of tricky to do that. You got to run with estimates, like what is your is your vacancy 10%? Well, probably will be that. Your repairs will probably be $800 to $1,000 a year, but maintenance and turnover expenses. But it's coming years, it's going to be a lot more. So if you have other houses or other in your portfolio, look at those, see what similar houses are doing in comparison to that. And just see, or is it fixable? Is it so first of all, is it actually not cash flowing? And also, is it fixable? And that is is there something you could do? Could you subdivide off the back lot and sell it as a flag lot, where you have the property here and then a driveway that goes to the back and the back lot there, and make that, that income, reduce your loan amount or something like that? Can you turn it into a duplex? Can you reduce the utilities? Maybe the utilities are just too high. Can you increase the rent? Can you add a bathroom and increase the rent? So all these questions should be asked before giving up. And then also the other final question is, what hit are you going to take if you sell it? Are you going to make a bunch of money? Then probably, yeah. If you're going to take a huge hit, maybe it's worth holding on to it. So it's mostly a series of questions to ask more than just a direct answer.
The other possibility is, if you're cash poor, maybe somebody who's cash rich, and if there's value in this property, it could be something that you'd want to partner with, or bring somebody in on. Say, I don't really want to sell this, even though I need the money. What do you think about you coming in with me on it, and let's share this together? So that's another possibility of keeping it.
Next question. So it basically has to do with, we talk a lot about having your cash reserves and being strong that way. And some people, it's not, it's going to take a really long time to get, your cash reserves saved up and that sort of thing. So basically the question is, do you recommend that any cash flow earned off your investment properties stay in your business to build up reserves until they're built up, and then buy another property, or keep buying and not be as mindful about the reserves? What's your, say you're getting started in the game, you want to keep building, but we're also saying you want to have the cash reserves, and you can't all of those things maybe aren't possible for you at the same time. What do you prioritize?
I would just say this was in response to a point that we made about the importance of having cash reserves. Basically, not having cash reserves is what more or less started the financial crisis in 2008. And as the people who are in really big trouble now are those who didn't have cash reserves. Having cash reserves, as well as stable private lenders and long-term financing, or no debt, which is even better. But if you don't have high interest short-term financing, but long-term financing, stable private lenders, high occupancy, well-established systems, and cash reserves are what make you anti-fragile. And that's a term from Nassim Taleb, which you should definitely read his book, Anti-Fragile. But the idea is basically when a crash happens, are you going to break like a company that's fragile? Are you going to survive? That's robust? Or are you going to be able to take advantage of it? Because when crashes happen is when stuff is cheap. And so that's when you can take advantage if you have the cash reserves and private lenders and you're stable and you can handle those losses. That's when you can buy up stuff very inexpensively and you can take off and actually grow from crashes. You are anti-fragile. So that was what the question is in response to. And I think I'm, again, a lot, it depends, but it's, I think generally speaking, you want to build up those cash reserves. If you find the deal of the century, you jump on it. You find a way to buy that property. But at the same time, while you're building up your cash, real estate is not something you have to do one or the other. I mean, you don't want to do everything, but if you get a great deal, but you're trying to build up your cash reserves, you can also sell that great deal and make a bunch of money, and then your cash reserves are even higher, and then you can go look for another property. So I think
that's the key, isn't it, Andrew? Particularly when you're starting out, because most people aren't going to have a lot of cash reserves starting out. And so buying with a margin, in my mind, is the critical thing that you can always turn around and sell. And, when I first started, my thing was, if I can turn around and sell this and I can make $1 on it, including paying all the closing costs and the real estate cost, if there are some, then, and I'm convinced, I'm absolutely convinced I could take a loss, but I could make $1 out of it if I could sell it. That helped me realize I had cash reserves in a sense in the margin that I was buying properties. So if you're looking for properties that have a 25%, they're 25% lower than what a similar property would be as you comp it out, and you can value add to it and you increase your margin, so to speak, your safety margin, then I think you have to take some reasonable risk in those kind of situations.
Well,
okay, but I want to push back too, because you were doing that
I'm surprised.
in a very appreciating market. And would you have made that same decision if the pandemic happened in the 90s, when you were realizing you were in a market that was basically you could make a mistake at that moment in time? Would you make that same decision today?
If I was convinced I had a 25% margin, I guess I would probably do it. Again, how do you start from scratch and say, "Oh, I need a bunch of cash reserves right off the bat"? You just can't do it. I mean, there is a risk here, but the risk, I think, should be reasonable.
The way I would refer to it is there's a couple of things. One, starting with nothing, like the gurus just say, no money down, you don't need any money to start it. That is really not, I mean, you can start with a partner who brings the money. I think that's a thing, but real estate does require some money. So you do need to build up some save. That might just be $10,000, $20,000, but starting with $0 in just like a credit card, that is really not an approach that makes it. That's a way to buy guru stuff, not a way to invest.
But let me ask you, Andrew, if you were totally convinced that you had a 25% margin, you really did, even in this situation, wouldn't you probably buy it?
Get it under contract, but then you probably either find a partner or wholesale it. But you're usually not going to find that without marketing for it, which requires some money. So it's like the people who start real estate investing with zero, you probably want to build up some savings first or find a partner.
Did you have $0, Bill? In 1989, did you have zero?
I got a loan from my father that helped me start.
Right.
The thing I wanted to push back on was not that. Equity is great. You should always be aiming for high margins. You should never see your equity as cash reserves. The reason is that's like a secondary. I would actually say cash reserves 1, lines of credit 2, equity 3. But we don't need the second one, although they're nice. But you need cash reserves and equity. In a crisis, your equity goes away. Like it doesn't some of it just disappears. You lose value in your properties, but you also it's harder to get access to it because banks aren't lending, private lenders are skittish. All these it's not and people aren't buying, or at least they're not. So you can get access to it, but you usually you are fire selling at that point. You don't want to sell your properties in the middle of when the properties have dropped in value a lot. You want to, either sell them before that or hold on to them until they start to appreciate again. Otherwise, you are basically being one of those people fire selling that other investors who have the cash reserves are using to buy. So cash reserves need to be seen as separate than the equity in the property. The equity protects you from going down, but having cash reserves is what makes you anti-fragile because you can use those cash reserves as well as the stable private lenders, as well as your line of credits to jump on the potential deals that are there. So you want to, again, early on, it's hard to have those. I think you need a little bit to start, but you want to be cognizant of building that. And one way is you can think of having, early on, maybe 5%, preferably 10, but probably 5% aim for that of your assets in cash. As you get bigger and bigger, you can go down a little bit because you have economies of scale and you have like more diversification. So it's less likely to hit you as hard. Or some people think of it as months of saving. Like you can get through all of your expenses for 6 months. Aim for something like that would be a good way to think of it. Pick one, aim for it. It's something to build to. You might not start there, but it's something to build to. And so, and if you get that great deal and you like, this is going to cash me out completely. Well, you can sell that and make a big profit and then use that to start again.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. As an aspiring investor, my concern is how the after rehab values will be affected by the pandemic. If homes lose value, I foresee it difficult to use the BRRRR method. Yes, that's
if you don't got the skills.
So you want to continue being in the game, but we all don't know where this is going. Right now, we haven't necessarily seen the drop happen in home values. We all expect that it will because foreclosures are basically not being pursued right now. But at some point, there are people missing payments, foreclosures in the market. There's a lot of people losing jobs, their ability to buy going down. I think these are all things that are going to affect home pricing in the future. Correct?
It really is a strange market because going into this pandemic, there was such a tight market in many, many locations. And because of that, I think that's what's propped up the market and continues to do so. But over time, and I think we're not even, there's, of course, everybody has their own opinion. I think it's 2022 till we even start really pulling out of this thing. And can home prices stay stable that long when, as Amanda says, there's going to be a lot of people, sadly, who are going to be not able to make their payments and lenders coming to a conclusion that their patience has run out. And so these are going to go into foreclosure. And when that happens, that, there's a lot of properties that hit the market all of a sudden, and that jacks up the supply, which is what drives down the price. So it's really hard to say at this point. It's very unlike 2007, 2008, which the market was just, people had overpaid, they had over-leveraged, they had very few of their own assets, money into it, they got liar loans, all kinds of things were happening, and the market was at the very top. So it was there was not this tight market that we have right now, and it was a much different environment. So the outcome could be different. It's really hard to say.
I think there's another question is, were we, because I was predicting, although, predictions with economic predictions are worth about as much as fortune cookie predictions. But I was predicting that there was going to be a recession this year anyways. And so is COVID just exposing, triggering, and exacerbating a recession that was already here, which would make it all the worse. So I don't think we're going to know that for a while. That being said, this time real estate is not the cause of the recession. It is going to be dragged down by the coattails of the lockdown and whatever else.
Right. The loss
And
of
so
jobs
probably won't
is
be,
going to.
real estate was hit the worst last time. It will probably not be hurt the worst this time.
I mean, I think these are hard questions to answer because we don't know. We have not lived through something like this. So this is for the whole economy and country to come to a screeching halt, basically over the course of 5 days in March. Now we're just sort of waiting for things to open back up, what that looks like, people getting back to work. If I was somebody wanting to come in and start my investment career right now, I might be in a wait and see. I don't know. I think a lot of it would be depend on if I can get the private loan in place, can I cash flow this property as is for the long term? And can I make that happen? That would be like my question. Can I do this without being able to burr out? I mean, I think a lot of those depend on your current circumstances.
Yeah, if you've got a bank that is financing 75%, like the first question we were talking about, if you don't have a bank right now, then you probably should be more cautious. If you have a bank that will go at 75%, you have a relationship, that's all the better. I think the general rule of thumb for this situation, as with any situation where you're buying on the downslope, because real estate market is cyclical, it goes like this. And so when you're buying on the upslope, you want to be aggressive. When you're buying at the peak, you want to be careful. When you're buying on the trough, you want to be aggressive, but not super aggressive. When you're buying when you're buying at the trough, you want to be super aggressive. Never mind. I'm sorry. You want to be super aggressive in the trough and the upswing. Then you want to be very careful at the top. During the downslope, you want to be super careful because you need a bigger margin. And so if you're buying at 75%, you should be looking for 70 or even 65% after repair value.
It's hard to catch a falling knife. That's the thing.
It's hard to catch a falling knife, but there are catchable knives that fall, particularly butter knives, which aren't even sharp. So and it's okay.
Those are your
so look
deals,
for the butter
right?
knives. Look for the butter knives. That is the advice there.
I think that's the title of this podcast, don't you think? Look for the butter knives out there.
Catch the falling butter knife.
And realize you won't even know if it was a butter knife until you get a year down the line. But catch them no less. Do it.
Be more careful than you would have otherwise and look for a better ARV than you would have otherwise. And if you're just getting started, I mean, it might be a time to what better time to learn? You're cooped up in your place. You're in quarantine. I mean, just binge watch or listen to The Good Stewards. You got like hours and hours there. You'll be an expert afterwards. I got a book coming out. You can buy that, read it. You got blog posts. You got my post on Bigger Pockets. You got our blog post on The Good Stewards. Ryan's got his videos. We've got other videos. Just go to town. Like it's a good time to learn. Probably a little bit of a wait and see, especially I don't know exactly when this episode will come out compared to when the quarantines will start ending. But I would want to see at least, especially if you're getting started, I wouldn't want to start until at least a month after the quarantine ends. That we should be able to assess the damage better then. And then that way you can be like, okay, this is going to free fall. I need to wait. Or it's bad, but it's not too bad. I'm going to get in it, but I'm going to be more careful and go for 65, 70%. So that is the first thing. But the second thing is you got a lot of time on your hands. You're in quarantine, whatever. Start reading, start listening to podcasts, learn all the stuff. There's a lot to learn. And this is what better time to do it than now.
And all real estate is local. So every locality is going to be different in terms of the supply demand, and weigh that in the balance as well. The less desirable areas are going to be harder hit. Places like condos are going to be harder hit, I think. At least they were the last recession. So you got to weigh those factors as well.
I think that about wraps it up. We've had a good little discussion here, touched on a lot of topics. I know a lot of people are antsy, very nervous. A lot of questions regarding COVID-19, regarding the lockdown, regarding the state of the mortgage industry, regarding real estate values, regarding what to do. And since we're all licensed epidemiologists and PhD economists, we can give you those answers with a complete degree of certainty. And so I hope you've enjoyed our show here. Please join us next time and check us out at goodstewards.com. Thank you.